Chapter 2 The Blue Castle. When cousin Stickles knocked at her door, well as he knew it was 7:30 and she must get up. As long as she could remember, cousin Stickles had knocked at the door at 7:30. Cousin Stickles and Mrs. Frederick Stirling and Mrs. Frederick Stirling had been up since 7, but Valency was allowed to lie abed half an hour longer because of a family tradition that she was delicate. Valency got up, though she hated getting up more this morning than ever she had before. What was there to get up for? Another dreary day, like all the days that had preceded it, full of meaningless little tasks, joyless and important, that benefited nobody. But if she did not get up at once, she would not be ready for breakfast at 8 o'clock. Hard and fast times for meals were the rules in the Mrs. Sterling's household. Breakfast at 8, dinner at 1, supper at 6, year in, year out. No excuses for being late or ever too ready. So as he got shivering, the room was bitterly cold with the raw, penetrating chill of a wet May morning. The house would be cold all day. It was one of Mrs. Frederick's rules that no fires were necessary after the 24th of May. Meals were cooked on the little oil stove in the back porch, and though May might be icy and October frostbitten, no fires were lighted until the 21st of October by the calendar. On the 21st of October, Mrs. Frederick began cooking over the kitchen range and lighted a fire in the sitting room stove in the evenings. It was whispered about in the connection that the late Frederick Sterling had caught the cold, which resulted in his death during vacancy's first year of life. Pardon me, Vacancy's first year of life, because Mr. Frederick would not have a fire on the 20th of October. She lighted it the next day, but that was a day too late for Frederick Sterling. Vacancy took off and hung up in the closet her night her nightdress, of course, unbleached cotton with high neck and long, tight sleeves. She put on undergarments of similar nature, a dress of brown gingham, thick black stockings, and rubber-heeled boots. Of late years, she had fallen into the habit of doing her hair with the shade of the window by the looking glass pulled down. The lines on her face did not show so plainly then, but this morning she jogged the shade to the very top and looked at herself in the leprous mirror with a passionate determination to see herself as the world saw her. The result was rather dreadful. Even a beauty would have found that harsh, unsoftened side light trying. Well as it saw straight black hair, short and thin, always lustreless despite the fact that she gave it 100 strokes of the brush, neither more nor less, every night of her life, and faithfully rubbed Redfern's hair vigor into the roots, more lustreless than ever in its morning roughness. Fine, straight black rolls, A nose she had always felt was much too small, even for her small three-cornered white face. A small, pale mouth that always fell open a trifle or little, pointed white teeth, a figure thin and flat-breasted, rather below the average height. She had somehow escaped the family high cheekbones and her dark brown eyes, too soft and shadowy to be black, had a slant that was almost oriental. Apart from her eyes, she was neither pretty nor ugly, just insignificant looking. She concluded bitterly. How plain the lines around her eyes and mouth were in that merciless light. And never had her narrow, white face looked so narrow and so white. She did and pardon me, she did her hair in a pompadour. Pompadours had long gone out of fashion, but they had been in van. Valency first put her hair up, and Aunt Wellington had decided that she must always wear her hair so. It's the only way that becomes you. Your face is so small that you must add height to it by pompadour effect, said Aunt Wellington, who always enunciated commonplaces as if uttering profound and important truths. Valency has hankered, Valency had hankered to do her hair pulled low on her forehead, with puffs above ears, and Olive was wearing hers. But Aunt Wellington's dictum had such an effect on her that she never dared change her hairstyle again. But then, there were so many things Valency never dared to do. All her life, she had been afraid of something. She thought bitterly. From the very dawn of recollection, when she had been so horribly afraid of the big black bear that lived, so Cousin Stickles told her, in the closet under the stairs. And I always be, I know it. I can't help it. I don't know what it would be like not to be afraid of something. Afraid of our mother's sulky fits, afraid of offending Uncle Benjamin, afraid of becoming a target for Aunt Wellington's contempt, afraid of Aunt Isabel's biting comments, afraid of Uncle James' disapproval, pardon me, disapproval, afraid of offending the whole clan's opinions and prejudices, afraid of not keeping up appearances, afraid to say what she really thought of anything, afraid of poverty in her old age. Fear, fear, fear. She could never escape from it. It bound her and enmeshed her like a spider's web of steel. Only in her blue castle she could find temporary release. And this morning, Valency could not believe she had a blue castle. She would never be able to find it again. 29, unmarried, undesired. What she had to do with the fairy like chatelaine of the blue castle. She would cut such childish nonsense out of her life forever and face reality unflinchingly. She turned from her unfriendly mirror and looked out. The ugliness of the view always struck her like a blow. The red fence, the tumble down old carriage shop, in the next lot, plastered with crude, violently colored advertisements, the grimy railway station beyond, with the awful derelicts that were always hanging around it, even at this early hour. In the pouring rain, everything looked worse than usual. especially the Beasley advertisement. Keep that schoolgirl complexion. Valency had kept her schoolgirl complexion. That was just the trouble. There was not a gleam of beauty. Anyway, exactly like my life, thought Valency drearily. Her brief bitterness had passed. She accepted facts as resignedly as she had always accepted them. She was one of the people whom life always passes by. There was no altering that fact. In this mood, Valency went down to breakfast. Chapter number 3. Breakfast was always the same: oatmeal porridge, which Valency loathed, toast and tea, and 1 teaspoon of marmalade. Mrs. Frederick thought 2 teaspoons extravagant. Mrs. Frederick. But that did not matter to Valency, who hated marmalade too. The chilly, gloomy little dining room was chillier and gloomier than usual. The rain streamed down outside the window. The parted starlings in atrocious gilt frames, wider than the pictures, glowered down from the walls. And yet Cousin Stickles wished Valency many happy returns of the day. Sit up straight, Darcy, was all her mother said. Valency sat up straight. She talked to her mother and Cousin Stickles of the things they always talk of. She never wondered what would happen if she tried to talk of something else. She knew, therefore, she never did it. Mrs. Frederick was offended with the province for spending a rainy day when she wanted to go on a picnic. It was not spending, apparently, it was sending. So she ate her breakfast in a sulky silence, for which Valency was rather grateful. But Christian Stickles whined endlessly on as usual. Endlessly on as usual. Complaining about everything: the weather, a leak in the pantry, the price of oatmeal and butter, whatever. Valency felt at once she had buttered her toast too lavishly. The epidemic of moms in Deerwood. Das will be sure to catch them, she foreboded. Das must not go where she is likely to catch mumps, said Mrs. Frederick shortly. Valency had never had mumps, or whooping cough, or chicken pox, or measles, or anything she should have had. Nothing but horrible colds every winter. Dawson's winter colds were a sort of tradition in the family. Nothing, it seemed, could prevent her from catching them. Mrs. Frederick and Cousin Stickles did their right best. One winter, they kept Valency housed up from November to May in the warm sitting room. She was not even allowed to go to church. And Valency took cold after cold and ended up in bronchitis in June. None of my family were ever like that, said Mrs. Frederick, implying that it must be a Sterling tendency. The Sterlings seldom take colds, said Cousin Stickles resentfully. She had been a Sterling. I think, said Mrs. Frederick, that if a person makes up her mind not to have colds, she will not have cold. So that was the trouble. It was all Valency's own fault. But on this particular morning, Valency's unbearable grievance was that she was called Dawes. She had endured it for 29 years, and all at once she felt she could not endure it any longer. Her full name was Valency Jane. Valency Jane was rather terrible, but she liked Valency with its odd, outland ting. It was always a wonder to Valency that the Starlings had allowed her to be so Christian. She had been told that her maternal grandfather, old Amos Wansborough, had chosen the name for her. Her father had tacked on the Jane by the way of civilizing it, and the whole connection got out of the difficulty by nicknaming her Das. She never got valency from anyone but outsiders. Martha, she said timidly, would you mind calling me Valency after this? Das seems so I don't like it. Mrs. Frederick looked at her daughter in astonishment. She wore glasses with enormously long lenses that gave her eyes a peculiarly disagreeable appearance. What's the matter with Das? It seems so childish. Flatter Valency. Oh, Mrs. Frederick had been a Vansbera, and the Vansbera smile was not an asset. I see. Well, it should suit you then. You are childish enough in all conscience, my dear child. I am 29, said the dear child desperately. I would proclaim it from the housetops if I were you, dear, said Mrs. Frederick. 29. I'd been married 9 years when I was 29. I was married at 17, said Wellington furtively. Mrs. Frederick, except for those terrible glasses and the hooked nose that made her look more like a parrot than a parrot itself could look, was not ill looking. At 20, she might have been quite pretty, but cousin Stickles, and yet Christine Stickles, had once been desirable in some men's eyes. Valency felt that cousin Stickles, with her broad, flat, wrinkled face, a mole right on the end of her jumpy nose, bristling hairs on her chin, wrinkled yellow neck, pale, protruding eyes, and thin, puckered mouth, had yet this advantage over her, this right to look down on her. And even yet, cousin Stickles was necessary to Mrs. Frederick. Valency wondered pitifully what it would be like, what it would be like to be wanted by someone, needed by someone. No, no one in the whole world need or miss anything from life if she dropped suddenly out of it. She was a disappointment to her mother. No one loved her. She had never so much as had a girlfriend. I haven't even a gift for friendship. She had once admitted to herself pitifully. Das, you haven't eaten your crusts, said Mrs. Frederick rebukingly. It rained all the forenoon without cessation. Valency pieced a quilt. Valency hated piecing quilts, and there was no need of it. The house was full of quilts. There were three big chests packed with quilts in the attic. Mrs. Frederick had begun storing away quilts when Valency was 17, and she kept on storing them. Though it did not seem likely that Valency would ever need them, but Valency must be at work and fancy work materials were too expensive. Idleness was his cardinal sin in the Stalling household. When Valency had been a child, she had been made to write down every night in a small, hated black notebook all the minutes she had spent in idleness that day. On Sundays, her mother made her tart them up, pray over them. On this particular form of this day of destiny, Valence spent only 10 minutes in idleness. At least Mrs. Frederick and cousin Stickles would have called it idleness. She went to her room to get a better thimble, and she opened Thistle Harvest guiltily and ran. The woods are so human, wrote John Foster, that to know them one must live with them. An occasional saunter through them, keeping to the well-trodden paths, will never admit us to their intimacy. If we wish to be friends, we must out, seek them out, and win them by frequent, reverent visits at all hours, by morning, by noon, by night, and at all seasons, in spring, in summer, in autumn, and winter. Otherwise, we can never really know them, and any pretense we may make to the contrary will never impose on them. They have their own effective way of keeping aliens at a distance and shutting their hearts to mere casual sightseers. It is of no use to seek the woods from any mortal except sheer love of them. They will find us out at once and hide all their sweet, old world secrets from us. But if they know we come to them because we love them, they will be very kind to us and give us such treasures of beauty and delight as are not bought or sold in any marketplace. For the woods, when they give it all, give unstintedly and hold nothing back from their true worshippers. We must go to them lovingly, humbly, patiently, watchfully, and we shall learn what poignant loveliness lurks in the wild places and silent intervales, lying under starshine and sunset. What cadences of unearthly music are harped and aged pine boughs or crooned in copses of fir. What delicate savors exhale from mosses and ferns in sunny corners or on damp brooklands. What dreams and myths and legends of an older time haunt them. Then the immortal hearts of the woods will beat against ours, and its subtle life will steal into our veins, and make us its own forever. So that no matter where we go or how widely we wander, we shall yet be drawn back to the forest to find our most enduring kinship. Das, called her mother from the hall below. What you doing all by yourself in that room? Wellness dropped Thistle House like a hot coal and fled downstairs to her patches. But she felt this strange exhilaration of spirit that always came momentarily to her when she dipped into one of John Foster's books. Wellness did not know much about birds, except the haunted groves of oak and pine around her brook castle. But she had always secretly hankered after them, and a Foster book after woods was next best thing to the woods themselves. At noon, it stopped raining, but the sun did not come out until 3. Then Wallace timidly said she thought she would go uptown. What do you want to go uptown for? Demanded her mother. I want to get a book from the library. You got a book from the library only last month, week. No, it was 4 weeks. 4 weeks? Nonsense. Really, it was, mother. You're mistaken. It cannot possibly be more than 2 weeks. I dislike contradictions, and I do not see what you want to get a book for. Anyhow, you waste too much time reading. Of what value is my time? Asked Valency bitterly. Das, don't speak in that tone to me. We need some tea, and said Cousin Stickles. She might go and get that if she wants a walk, though his damp weather is bad for colds. They argued the matter for 10 minutes longer, and finally, Mrs. Frederick agreed rather grudgingly that Valency might go. Here this chapter ends in 25 minutes. I wish to take a leave now. Peace.